For more than a decade, this was the language of personal computing, a world of beige boxes, gray windows, and sharp corners. A tool for the office, not the living room. And then, in October 2001, Microsoft gave us this, a blast of color and glossy gradients. The world called it a Fisher-Price design, a toy. They thought it was a simple facelift to look prettier. But that friendly face wasn't a sign of confidence. It was an act of desperation. This single green button wasn't just a redesign. It was a calculated gamble born from a decade of technical failures, a panicked reaction to a brilliant rival, and a desperate attempt to not be left behind. This is the story of a design that everyone hated. A design that was objectively brilliant, but subjectively rejected. And how a series of catastrophic failures accidentally turned it into one of the most beloved icons in software history. This is the real story of Windows XP. And it's a story about how you create a legend by failing. In the late 90s, Microsoft had a problem. They were running two separate versions of Windows. One was stable but incompatible with most software. The other worked with everything but crashed constantly. Maintaining two systems that looked identical but worked differently was expensive and confusing, so they tried to merge them. The result was Windows ME, a disaster. Buggy, unstable, incompatible. It became a punchline. Meanwhile, the design hadn't changed since 1995. Gray, utilitarian, angular. And by the end of the 90s, that was becoming a problem too. The audience was growing beyond offices. Personal computers were moving into homes, and gray corporate interfaces suddenly felt cold. Then Apple showed the world Aqua. Glossy, colorful, friendly. It looked like the future. Microsoft panicked. They were facing a crisis of both style and substance. Their design was cold and outdated, and their software was unstable. And this problem, this failure of both speed and quality, still haunts the corporate world today, just in a different form. Think about the last time you had to make a critical presentation. The deadline is looming. You needed to look professional, but more importantly, you needed to be smart. You need data, research, charts, but you have hours, not days. You start scrambling for data, fighting with templates, and end up with something that just feels like a compromise. This exact dilemma, speed versus depth, is what this video's sponsor, Skywork, is built to solve. Skywork is an AI workspace, and their slides agent is basically what presentations were always meant to be. Instead of spending half a day fighting with formatting, you can give it a single prompt and get a fully structured, editable presentation in about 20 minutes. But it's not just about speed. Unlike tools that just give you pretty, empty templates, Skywork creates presentations with substance. It pulls in real-world data, citations, and builds charts in real time. That means the content is backed by solid research and ready for professional use right out of the box. You're not locked into one style. Need an in-depth market analysis? Done. A business proposal? A technology study? Easy. It even has different modes. Fast mode for urgent projects and deep mode, which uses professional level search for truly in-depth, high-quality presentations. And my favorite feature is template cloning. If you have a brand style, Skywork can generate new slides that automatically match it. It's perfect for letting your whole team, even non-designers, create high-quality, consistent materials. So while Microsoft in 2000 was trapped in panic and failing products, you don't have to be. You can make compelling presentations fast without sacrificing style or substance. You can use the code DESIGN50 or subscribe through my link to get up to 20% off. Only 50 spots are available. Thank you to Skywork for supporting this channel. And now, back to Microsoft's panic. Leaked files from that time show Microsoft tried to copy Aqua almost pixel for pixel. They called it Candy, but something stopped them. And honestly, I'm glad they did, because what they made instead was more interesting. Two internal design systems, Watercolor and Mallard. The second name is strange, right? It was a decoy. A fake design meant to distract competitors while they worked on the real one. Luna, saturated blue, bright green, matte plastic textures. Before this, color, that bold, was only used for highlighting active elements. Now it was the entire interface. It was developed by an external studio that had previously worked for Next, the company Apple acquired to build macOS. So this wasn't amateur work. This was high-level design executed by people who understood what Apple was doing. And objectively, it was excellent. The task was to make the interface more material, more approachable. Mission accomplished. Everything became more logical, more understandable. Functions didn't disappear, they expanded. The Bliss wallpaper became the most viewed photograph in human history. The sounds were consistent and purposeful. This is objective. But beautiful? That's subjective. And people hated it. They called it childish. A toy interface. Too friendly, too soft, too unserious. There was a fascinating pattern in user research. Many people said it was perfect for their parents or for their children, but not for them. because Luna didn't just change how Windows looked, it changed how people felt about themselves while using it. If you were a designer, an engineer, a professional, this interface whispered, you need help, you need simplification, you need to be guided. It felt condescending. I didn't experience this. I was in middle school when XP came out. For me, it was just normal. I spent years in this system, made my first website in it, built my school's website in 2003. They even wrote about us in the local newspaper. In a small city in the early 2000s, that wasn't common. So XP is just the baseline of my memory. I never judged it as beautiful or ugly. It was the water I swam in. But my dad, he immediately switched to the silver theme. When I called him to ask why, he said it seemed primitive. Everyone had it, so I changed it. My uncle refused to upgrade from Windows 2000. He said XP didn't look serious, and both of them admitted functionally it was better, more stable and faster. But the look bothered them. Not because it was badly designed, because it made them feel like children. This kind of insight, how design decisions connect to psychology, identity, and culture. This is what I write about every week in my newsletter. If you want more of this depth, the link is in the description. So Microsoft gave up. In 2001, the same year XP launched, they announced Windows Longhorn, and they immediately abandoned Luna. They decided to chase Apple again. This time, glass. But then something strange happened. Longhorn became development hell. Delays stacked on delays. Features were scrapped. The project restarted from scratch. What was supposed to take 2 years took 6.5. I remember joking with friends that Longhorn would never ship. We'd download leaked builds just to see the interface. And honestly, it looked fine, but nothing as bold as XP. Meanwhile, service packs kept improving XP. Stability increased, speed increased, security increased, and something else increased too: familiarity. 6.5 years is long enough for an entire generation to grow up with something. And when Vista finally launched in 2007, it was a catastrophe. Slow, unstable, driver issues made it nearly unusable for many people. Nobody cared about the design because the system barely worked, so Microsoft scrambled. They toned down the glass, they brought back familiar elements from XP. And that took another 2 years. By the time Windows 7 arrived in 2009, people had been using XP for 8 years on average. For some of us, 10 years. My entire adolescence, middle school to the end of university, my formative years, and I wasn't alone. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Windows XP didn't become iconic because it was brilliant. It became iconic because Microsoft failed to replace it. The design that everyone rejected in 2001 became the design everyone mourned in 2014. But nothing changed about the design itself. The colors didn't shift, the buttons didn't evolve. Bliss stayed bliss. What changed was us. We spent 10 years with it. We grew up with it. We built careers with it. We made things with it. And somewhere along the way, familiarity became nostalgia. Nostalgia became affection. And affection became identity. This is what makes design so strange. We don't judge it objectively. We judge it through the lens of who we were when we first encountered it. The professionals who rejected XP in 2001 because it made them feel like children, by 2009 they were defending it. Because now rejecting it felt like rejecting a part of themselves. My dad, who switched to the silver theme because the blue felt too common, he still remembers XP fondly. Not because the design was good, because he was younger then. And me, I can't separate XP from the person I was becoming. Learning to code, making websites, discovering design. That green start button isn't just a UI element. It's a marker of my own timeline. This is the brutal honesty of aesthetic judgment. We think we're evaluating design, but we're really defending our memories. We think we're judging interfaces, but we're really judging ourselves. And Microsoft? They never figured this out. They gave up on Luna immediately. They chased Apple into glass, then flat design, then fluent, always reactive, always insecure. And here's what haunts me about this story. Microsoft had a chance to create something legendary from day one. The design was objectively excellent, functionally superior, visually bold, but they abandoned it the moment people said, "This makes me feel like a child." They had the vision, they just didn't have the courage to stand behind it when it mattered. And the thing is, I understand why. Because when you create something authentic and the world tells you it's wrong, the easiest thing to do is believe them, to change, to conform. Windows XP reminds me of myself. How many times have I made decisions not from what I actually believed, but from fear of what others would think? How many times have I abandoned something I knew was right because the consensus said otherwise? Microsoft chose acceptance over authenticity, and it cost them a decade. By the time people loved XP, Microsoft had already moved on. They were too busy copying Apple to notice they'd accidentally created an icon. But here's the strange part. There was one element Microsoft never compromised on. One decision they made in 1995 and refused to change for 30 years: the Start button. While they copied everything else from Apple, glass, minimalism, flat design, this one element stayed. And Apple never touched it either. In an industry where everyone steals from everyone, why is this the one thing they refuse to copy? Because the answer to that question reveals something that changes everything we just discussed. Without understanding why the Start button survived when Luna didn't, this whole story is incomplete. That's next. And don't forget about sponsor of this video. You can use the code DESIGN50 or subscribe through my link to get up to 20% off. Only 50 spots are available.